we're going to talk about is chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are large bodies that are found in plant cells only. They're not found in animals, and they are responsible for photosynthesis. Photosynthesis uses sunlight to make sugars for the plant and for the animals that eat them. The chloroplast looks like this. That is, it has an outer membrane, and it has inner membranes called thylakoid membranes that sometimes stack into little stacks called granum. And then it will have an internal chamber called the stroma. Here we're going to talk more about this when we talk about photosynthesis, but these are very important organelles for plants. Now, all organisms, including plants, have what we call a mitochondria. So mitochondria do cellular respiration. Mitochondria are found throughout the cell, whether it's plant or animal, in and out, or in between all the other organelles. They are also a structure that has an outer membrane and an inner membrane that makes little indentations called cristae, and the middle chamber is called the matrix. So it looks similar to a chloroplast in that regard. Looking at it in the true electron micrograph, you can see it looks a little bit different, but still membranes, cristae within there that help with the cellular respiration process. Again, this is a process that we will talk more about later as time goes by. All right, so the other thing that we need to talk about is something called the cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton is many protein filaments that occur throughout, especially in animal cell. There are some in plant cells as well. And if they're in plant cells, they're responsible for the movement of cytoplasm or cytoplasmic streaming called cyclosis, which we will talk about a little bit later. Actually, you'll talk about it in lab. And but in animal cells in particular, it acts like an infrastructure. In other words, it holds all the organelles in the relative position to each other. As opposed, remember that animals are moving, and if they're moving, it may squish a cell, kind of squish it. And if it squished it, then the relative position, remember there's a flow from the nucleus to the rough to the smooth to the Golgi. If it were to squish it, it would be interrupting that flow. So the cytoskeleton helps the cell keep its shape. It is also going to help help with the cell division process, pulling the chromosomes apart or reorienting the chromosomes. And there's different kinds of fibers. This is in your textbook, so you can take a closer look at it, but basically they're small, medium, and large, and they are different, slightly different structures depending on whether they're small, medium, and large, and they have some different functions. Some of them are just acting like this infrastructure that I've been talking about. Some of them are acting like the microtubules. This is helping move things about. Some of them are actually responsible for the movement within a cell. For example, they can be part of muscle fibers, and they actually have little hooks on them that allow the muscle fibers to contract, or of course that takes energy to contract or release, and this is going to allow your muscles to work. Or it could actually do something like this where, headed the wrong direction. So these are showing you the muscle fibers. It could do something like this where it builds up on one side of the cell, and it causes the cell cytoplasm to flow that direction. So like an amoeba would do that. I always think of this as like the little hamster and the little balls that you put them in that they can just move around the room in, because if they move to one side, it's going to pull everything else with it. So that's kind of how this one works. And this is showing you the cyclosis, that is the cytoplasmic streaming, where these fibers are moving the chloroplasts around. So in essence, it's kind of like the rotisserie of the chloroplast, because if the sun is coming from one direction, these chloroplasts over here aren't getting as much sun. So if they rotate around, then they will get even amounts of sun. All right, the other thing that the protein fibers are related to is the cilia and flagella arrangement. This is something that they call the 9-2 arrangement. What this means is that there are proteins kind of lined up on top of each other. This is kind of a side view of it. 9 of them out here, and then 2 major ones on the inside. these can contract. So you could have, for example, the ones on one side contracting and the ones on the other side not contracting, and this would cause the flagella to actually move in this direction, and vice versa. So in other words, the flagella or cilia can move back and forth. This is also the same basic structure of a centriole or a centrosome, which remember we talked about was part of cell division. So these things, these structures are somewhat related. And you can see here's some, typical cilia flagella that you might have, we talked about these before, but I mentioned a sperm cell has a long flagella, and this is like showing you, you can kind of see it from the side here, many cilia that would be on the outside of something like a paramecium.